Hello everybody, this is Jannecke from Wisdom from North. I'm now recording live from the Wellbeing Festival at Lillestrøm in Norway, and I'm sitting here with Osiris Montenegro. Hello, how are you doing today?
Very happy to be here with you.
You're quite an interesting man, I think. You're a spiritual teacher, you've been working and traveling all around the world, and now you're doing a talk or different talks here about how to be excited about your future and how to lose fear. And I know that you work with personal development and with helping people to become self-aware. There's many things I want to speak to you about today, but how can we be excited about our future when we perhaps have so many worries to take care of?
Well, the actual title of the lecture in the class is How to be excited about your future and have nothing to fear. And the premise is that the fear that we worry about is all psychological, which means that we worry about things that have not happened. And by definition, the future is literally being created as the consequences of what we choose. So if you're putting your attention into your future, expecting what you don't want or what you don't have, then it's very likely that you will create that, and at least you will feel very anxious about it. And what I teach is basically what fear is, and what excitement is, and what they have in common. And then within that, I also include in the lecture the teachings about minding your mind.
Minding your mind?
Yes. Meaning that not only do you need to be aware of fear and directing the fear into the future from the past, but you also need to move your attention from that mental activity, future past, which is not real, but is happening in the present. And so subtract your attention from thinking to paying attention. And that's the essence of minding your mind, using the mind to focus your attention instead of thinking for you or creating an identity for you.
Have you managed this yourself, or I assume that you're not perfect like nobody is, but how would you say that you have managed this yourself?
Every day, all day long. Yeah, so minding your mind is not something that you actually end one day. No, because basically we have instincts that are wired into our nervous system, our brain, our way of perception, that will react to things regardless of what you think or what you don't think. So what I teach is that if you have post-trauma, pain that you haven't resolved in your unconscious mind, that fear and that pain is going to stimulate thinking. And then when you have an instinctual system that when you are afraid and in pain you need to react, then people naturally live inside a reactive mind. And what I teach is how to recognize that most of the patterns of thinking come from the past, that we're basically afraid of the past. But the way the mind functions is that fear is always about the future, what's going to go wrong in the future. But in reality, we only fear what we have already experienced. And because we have trauma, we associate the new with the past. When children first come to the world, they're just curious and excited. And then they begin to experience pain. And then the pain that is not healed begins to make them think about future pain. And then we get stuck into thinking about the future and associating it with pain or with fear or with what we don't want. So what I'm talking about today is that if you want a future, first you need to choose one.
If you want a future, you need to choose one? But what do you mean if you want a future? I assume I have a future.
Well, you have a destiny that has been set in motion since the time you were born. Okay, and there are many ways to look at that. If you accept that you are a soul, not just a chance biological accident, then your soul obviously has a blueprint of the things that it wishes to experience. And then you get inside a body and have your journey about that. So a lot of that is already created by you, but you still have free will, between here and there, how you're going to get from here to there, right? But if you're not making that choice consciously, your past experiences, your past fears, your past hurts are going to make the choice for you. Basically, avoiding what you don't want while you're also moving towards it.
But if there's a blueprint there, if there's a destiny there, doesn't that mean that my soul will steer me into the right way anyway?
And it does all the time, from the inside and from the outside. The events that happen to you are basically feedback about what are you thinking and what are you feeling. And then from the inside, that's another thing that I teach. If you remove the fear from your belly, then you have this wonderful apparatus that has the sensing capacity to know. And to know into the future. We call that intuition. We call that, common sense. We call that deja vu. There are many ways that we can access things, in a different flow than past, present, and future.
That was interesting. Talk a little bit about that. You said fear in the stomach, that we can release that.
Yes, we have neurons in our heart and also in our stomach. So we have a feeling center that knows things without having to analyze linearly or correlate with the past. So the instinctual feeling in the belly is basically sensing a yes and no. For example, the number one primary of the survival instinct is safety. So if I'm walking through the jungle and there is a hungry tiger fear, my body, my belly will pick up, on the other side of the mountain, I'm going to be lunch. So there was a bad feeling of going in that direction. And if I'm paying attention, if I'm self-aware, I will notice that, it doesn't feel good to go that way. So I'm going to stop and then decide, okay, so which way do I want to go? What I do is that I just let my body turn, and then, I trust that. So that's a metaphor of mind in your mind. But in real life, anytime I have a situation where I react, the first thing I do is to take a deep breath and become aware of what I'm thinking. And it's usually negative, right? So usually, why is this?
Still for you?
For me, yeah, I'm talking about myself, yeah. So what happens is that I see me as an aware ego, very much so. I still have a name, I still have a body, I identify with a life, I have a personal life. And then beyond that, I'm also aware that there is a being expressing a destiny, through my actions that I get inspired from. And then I intend every day to have a partnership with that as best as possible. But when I go unconscious and I react to something, I lose that connection because I'm in survival. But I've also trained myself that, surviving doesn't feel good. So I quickly detect the uneasiness in my stomach, or the tension in my chest, or the tension in my jaw, or the tension in my eyes. And when I know that I'm armoring for protection, the very first thing I do, which is what I'm going to be teaching today, is look around and then acknowledge that I am safe. So the more you associate safety with inside and not with the outside circumstances, the more you can relate to the outside circumstances as they come up. I mean, things are neutral, but relative to us, they could be dangerous or they could not be dangerous, right? Like an earthquake is really dangerous. A confrontation with your boss is not really dangerous. It just has consequences.
But still, the same mechanisms are the same in your stomach and the fear response.
Exactly, and if you associate your boss with a tiger, then you're at a disadvantage to negotiate properly, right? Or to stand up to your boss, or to disagree with your boss. So getting rid of your psychological fear is essential to live a life where you have power to do and power to choose and power to say no.
So how do I do that? Like something happens and I get fear and I realize, okay, I can become aware. This is not a dangerous situation. It's just my maybe reptile brain.
We have I call them my mental programs, or you could say my beliefs, or you can say my conditioning. All same thing. It's just information in your mind that you're activating through your brain, and it's a pattern. It's on repeat. So when you're aware of a pattern, the moment that you're aware, you have already interrupted the pattern. What people fail to do is that after they interrupt the pattern, move their attention and act differently or do something differently. And so the familiar puts you back into the pattern again. And so people, it would be like, I know I have a headache, but I won't take, whatever will make me, let's say I haven't eaten. So I have a headache. Now, okay, I'm hungry because I haven't eaten, but I'm not going to eat. Well, that doesn't change anything, right? So if you know why something is happening and it is something to do, then you just do what needs to be done. You don't think about it or you don't feel bad about it.
I've heard that many times that, the awareness is the most important thing. But in my experience, I am kind of losing or missing the next step because I'm aware of a lot of my patterns. And when I become aware of it, I feel like, oh, I have this fear or, oh, I have this feeling. But they're still there in a way. They don't disappear. It's still, I still don't like being in that fear.
So let me explain a little bit of what's happening for you. So you're correct. Awareness is not enough. And the next step from being aware is to be present. The soul is present, okay? That's what becomes present. So when you say, okay, I'm aware of a problem, and then you focus on the problem, then you are just the ego focusing on a problem, aware that there is a problem. But when you become present, then you are ego plus the presence of your soul, which doesn't see this as a problem. It just sees it like what's happening that needs a response. And so you focus on the response. But that capacity to see what's happening and focus on the response is not thinking. It's like an instantaneous knowingness. And so the more you practice expanding and looking at things, not thinking about them, but being aware of the you who's thinking, okay, now I have a problem, right? And you have a loving predisposition to your ego. You don't think that is...
Not judging it.
Not at all. As a matter of fact, the core of I have a new class next year, and it's called Learn from Your Ego. And then the first class is called Safety First. The number one concern for the ego is to be safe. And no matter what you have and what you do, if you don't feel safe, you're going to have a reactive, negative brain. But when you learn that you are safe, you can go into a responsive brain, which can be inspired with new information that maybe you didn't know. So transforming the fear is the most important thing. This is why. The body is wired so that if there is pain, we become afraid. And when we become afraid, we become angry. So it's pain, fear, aggression. Aggression is to take action, or to make a change, or to make a boundary, or to say yes, right? Whatever the choice needs to be. If you are blocking your aggression, like people who are afraid to get angry, then your fear gets very strong. And that's why your aggression now is used to suppress your anger, which turns it into hatred, and then you attack yourself to make you more afraid so that you behave in the way that you think this person will not reject you, will not punish you. And then you're basically a coward, a pleaser, a helper, a compulsive, doer, right? And that is a human doing, not a human being. And it's all because of fear.
I mean, we are so controlled by fear. And as many have been saying, you either live from love or fear, like the choices you're doing. But we're so controlled by this reptile brain, I feel like. And I'm wondering about if we were practicing this all the time. What do you think? Do you think we would actually develop this capacity to actually change the way our brains work? Because our brains are, there's this plasticity to the brain that we can actually change it. And do you think that we can actually change this reptile brain so it doesn't hit in like that, and the ego doesn't come forward every time there's just a little thing happening and we go straight into fear? With this practice, can that, change our brain?
Absolutely. I mean, just having the conversation and being aware that the fears that you're afraid of are not real, are just in your mind. I mean, if you really reflect on that and you begin to question your thoughts and begin to relax more often, that will not only change your brain, but your nervous system. So, of course, it's user-friendly, right? So you use it differently, it will give you a different response, a different result. And one of the things with fear is that fear uses imagination only to create bad scenarios. And when you do that, your brain has to go to that part to imagine and recreate that over and over and over. And so it gets very easy to worry. It gets very easy to expect the worst, right? But it's just a habit connected to an identity based on fear. Okay? So what happens when you begin to mind your mind and you do it with love for you and love for your life is that your identity begins to expand. Even your ego gets bigger so that there is more room to be flexible. You're not so rigid. You don't have to be right. You actually could rather be loving than being right. So that means that your personality is going from being a rigid childhood structure to a flexible and a strong structure where your intentions can move and then interact with the reality and able to respond in real time. You may have an intention that reality says, well, not yet. That's too early, this is not ready, but this is ready right now. So changing your mind in real time is a sign that, okay, I'm growing. I'm not taking things personally. For example, I got a 7-day Oslo card, right, which activated yesterday. Well, this morning when I got in the bus, the guy said, well, your card is expired, right? So automatically he thought that, there was a problem, so I just took out some cash and paid for the thing to get here. And then my mind, who was doing the normal reaction, was sitting down and still talking to the bus driver. It's not my fault, I didn't do anything wrong, it's the fucking, right? And so there it was my ego having a problem, while my presence had already resolved that and moved on to the new things, which is like, I'm in the bus, now I'm going to the festival. So that's an example of minding my mind where, for a moment, I thought there was something wrong, but there wasn't. I'll find out when I go check, it's like, okay, here's the receipt, I paid for a week pass, how come the next day it doesn't work? But I don't need to feel bad about it. I don't need to show up at the window with whoever's going to help me mad, that like, I paid for this and that didn't happen and you represent this company. No, right? I'm just going to go there happy and appreciation and get the person who's going to help me to, feel good about themselves. Because whether they help me or not, they have nothing to do with my problems, right? So if we all have, this awareness that how we are affects everybody else, and that how we are depends on how we decide to be, and that how I decide to be has everything with how I see myself and what's happening. And if I see myself, basically as a good, pure intention being who means no harm to anyone and who is happy to, contribute, then life just uses you. All day long opportunities happen where without planning or thinking, if you're just in the flow of I love myself, I love my life, and everything will get better, life says, oh, there is room in that one. Let's give them something to do. Because the mind is not so busy.
Tell us a little bit about, in the end, like how this has changed your life, this teaching.
I worry less, a lot less. I get angry when it's appropriate. I used to be one of those who pretended not to be angry. Now, if something happens, it requires that I get, raise my voice and hold my ground, I can do that. I never feel guilty for more than a second when I make a mistake or I make an error, because I realize that, okay, this has happened, so now that I am learning something about usually not paying attention, I'm going to make a promise to myself that, okay, I'm going to pay more attention. So now I forgive me. And so I live most of the time in a state of innocence. If I go unconscious, I have many guilt programs. I can easily, feel guilty and ashamed of myself. But that feels so bad that when that happens now, I wake up. So that's one of the ways that is practically, easy to measure. Yeah, that I'm less afraid and I don't feel bad about myself.
Thank you for sharing, because, you have so much wisdom to bring, and it's also interesting to hear about your journey and, your struggles, and then your, how it has helped you, because I think that we're all on our own journeys, and it's so inspiring to hear from others, and especially teachers, what they are working with, because then we can identify a little bit and not put people on pedestals, you know, because I think sometimes we do put teachers on pedestals, or I've done that in my past. I went to India and all these teachers were just like there, and I was here, and they never spoke about their problems in a way. But when people do, when teachers do, I'm like, oh, okay, then it's reachable for me too, you know. So that's the way I see it.
Yeah, in fact, if there was a philosophy about what I do, is to empower people, to really point out how powerful each one of us are, and along with that, how responsible that makes us. But you know, when people come to see me privately or they come to my courses, that is the number one message, that within your being there is the source of authority and wisdom to make every decision that life brings to you. And beyond that, that every decision that life brings to you, half of that you created. You asked for an adventure and life is bringing it to you, right? So as long as you realize that nothing is a mistake and nothing is wrong, and that an adventure by definition is uncertain, so relax about it. Know that you have, you know, an inner guidance, that if you just trust and you're clear about what is important to you, you know, your values, then it's just a matter of, you know, willing yourself to be present, taking ownership that, yeah, this is my choice, my decision, my life, right? And then you ground your presence in this world in a way that is creating something positive for you and everyone. But it's all about empowerment.
Thank you so much, and all the best with your talk today, and enjoy Oslo.
Thank you, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for watching, and thanks to Hatling Media who filmed.